How long has she been dead?
10 days. Not much left of her, is there?
It's enough.
If you say so, Dedris. Sir Dedris.
Dedris is fine. I hold no titles.
What do you think killed her?
That is what I'm going to find out.
Right. But if you had to make a wager?
Any number of moonspawn could have done this. Guessing's the work of the idle and the inexperienced, of which I'm neither. Did you know her?
Not well. She was one of our best rangers. Our best, truth be told. We never really saw her, though. The only nights she didn't leave town were when a monster moon burned in the sky. Whenever she wasn't out scouting by herself, she'd be at home with her family.
By herself? You don't go out in groups?
There aren't enough rangers. If the captain sent us out in units, we'd be worked to the bone within a fortnight.
So instead you allow one person to bear the weight of the rest of you.
She chose this life. Not everyone has that luxury.
Tell your captain either to send out rangers in units of at least 3, or none at all. This death was likely preventable.
I'll tell him you said as much. I doubt he'll listen if it comes from me, though.
Then I suggest you find yourself a new captain, son. The world outside your walls is a violent place. Nobody deserves to suffer it alone. I'd better get back to work before the sun goes down.
What exactly are you planning to do? There's no trail to follow.
The spell I'm about to cast allows me to view the memories of the dead. I will enter a trance that will leave me vulnerable to everything around me. In this state, I will begin speaking as I experience her last senses and thoughts as though they were memories of my own. It won't lead me straight to my quarry, but it'll let me know what I'm dealing with so I can adequately prepare myself.
That's incredible. How does it feel to view someone's memories like that?
Unpleasant.
Mind if I watch? I've always wanted to see Nighthunter magic in action.
This particular magic differs somewhat in comparison to that of my peers, but it makes no difference to me, so long as you remain silent.
What are those for?
The oars are of the earth. They will bind me to her body. The bottle there contains lotus petals and spring water from the drifting isles, which will tie me to her mind. And the chalk intertwines our spirits for however long I need the connection to last.
And the candles?
Those are for the smell.
Is the book part of the ritual too?
In a way. This journal is a bestiary composed of the creatures I have slain and the knowledge myself and other Nighthunters have obtained about each of them. It is the culmination of decades of work compiled into a single volume. When I die, it will live on to protect future hunters and rangers from the disadvantage of ignorance. Its secondary purpose is to help me remember what I see when I intone. Death is jarring, no matter how many times you've experienced it. Normally, I'd only be able to recall pieces of what I see after exiting my trance. When I speak with the journal open, my hand will commit my words to the page even if my mind is not prompted to, thus allowing me to study it after I've recovered from the spell.
What?
No more questions. If you wish to watch, I will not stop you. But do not speak, and do not disturb me once I begin. If the tale grows too uncomfortable for you to bear, you will leave as quietly as possible. Do you understand?
I do.
Good. Thrium. Wooden palisades rose behind Amelia, tall and proud, pretending to offer a defense against the creatures of the night. To be sent walking outside the village walls after sunset was a common punishment for rapers and murderers. But Amelia was not here because of any crime she committed. She was here by choice with only a spear, a knife, and an unlit lantern as her companions. Ranging duty was not often sought after, so when a fresh young soldier offered to throw her life away, the captain of the watch had been happy to oblige, saving his more experienced rangers for when something breached the meager walls that lined the village, like a delicate layer of skin ready to be peeled away. Contrary to what the captain had no doubt expected, Amelia survived 8 months of ranging duty on her own. She'd since been offered a more comfortable position inside the walls of Nisselton, Such promotions were rarely approved by the merchant lords, as their budgets were so very tight with all their ever so necessary expenses. Emilia had declined the position, much to the surprise of the other officers. Her place was out here doing the real work that kept her home safe, that kept her family safe. As the sun dipped over the horizon, Emilia closed her eyes and allowed a single image to flood her mind. A small house containing one large, scarcely decorated room. In one corner, a fire cast a warm light across the floor, low flames licking the bottom of an iron pot from which a savory aroma rose with the steam. Another corner housed her husband, Garand, who stood beside a newly made crib, his clothes still covered in sawdust. His smile was wide and proud. The tiny bundle in his massive arms murmured and reached up to play with the wood chips in his beard. Emilia opened her eyes as the last of the light vanished, the sun now hidden beyond the western hills. The warmth of the hearth was replaced by the cold of night, and the sounds of her family faded into a dreadful silence. With one forceful breath, she cleared her thoughts and stepped into the night. Comfort was a dangerous distraction to those who wandered the wilds, as likely to calm the thundering of a heartbeat as it was to stop it altogether. As Emilia crept away from the false safety of the wall of wooden spikes, golden lights sprang up along the ramparts. The watchfires provided another false sense of security to the guards patrolling the wall. Fire promised safety, especially to those who knelt before the altar of the kindler's flame. But it was also a beacon to Moonspawn, a declaration to every living monster that there was food behind those feeble barriers. For this reason, Emilia made the decision not to light her own lantern as she began her patrol. It was only for emergencies. An arrow's flight east of Nistleton was a forest. By day, it held a beautiful hike along an animal trail which led past a winding stream that gurgled over rocks and under a fallen tree. She and Garand had spent so many hours together there in their youth, chasing each other over the large crossing log, splashing beneath it, and laying exhausted beside it. By night, however, the forest was a nest of foul, hungry things. Or at least it had been, until Emilia cleared it of Moonspawn several months ago, and she intended to keep it clear. Emilia crouched in a bush near where the stream exited the woods. Only the gentle burble of the water disturbed the silence, her own breathing so shallow as to be nearly non-existent. Cloth-wrapped feet crept forward, gently bending grass and displacing leaves. Her pace was methodical, painfully so, but such caution was necessary while facing the night by oneself. Surviving after dark in the wild required no small amount of skill and knowledge, but in Emilia's experience it mostly came down to relying on her fear. Instinct had kept her alive in many situations where bravery would have seen her meet a grisly fate. Somewhere in the woods, a wolf howled and echoed calls rose in forlorn wails. Emilia shivered, but pressed on. She dealt with worse than wolves before. Keeping the stream to her left, Emilia stalked through the forest, ears alert to any snap or rustle. Following the stream allowed her to know where she was going despite how little light the moon and stars provided through the foliage. She passed the arching crossing log, moss-covered boulders, and remains of some ancient shrine from the old world. Historians claim the time-worn architecture predated the Moonspawn and the Crimson Moon, though Emilia figured such talk was nothing more than the novel idea of a better place. Confident nothing was nearby, Emilia left the stream behind and passed beneath the canopy of a long dead willow. Barren branches reached high before drooping down in clusters of thin, twisted fingers. She found her hand drifting to the cold steel of her lantern. Igniting it was tempting. The dead, gray roots of the willow sprawled like a swarm of worms fleeing from the earth. Something as trivial as a sprained ankle would be more than enough to get her killed. With a clenched jaw, Emilia decided not to rely on sight. She slowed her pace and felt her way through the maze of roots, stubbing her toe more than once. Still, the pain was worth avoiding attracting unwanted attention with the light of her lantern. Many Moonspawn were capable of hearing and smelling her, of course, but adding a blazing beacon to make their hunt that much easier was generally a bad idea. She only ever used it when she intended to plant her feet and fight. Beyond the willow waited a meadow, a peaceful place that was clear and bright in comparison to the rest of the forest without the canopy to filter out the moonlight. Spring flowers bloomed yellow, pink, and blue, though in the faint light they all appeared dull, their buds shut tight. Even nature hid itself behind walls to protect itself from the night. Perhaps Amelia would be wise to do the same. She scolded herself silently. Allowing doubt to trickle into her mind was a foolish thing to do. A wavering heart was not likely to last long when a steady hand was needed. With her mind refocused, Amelia turned back, ready to continue her round of the woods. Then she heard something. A rattling sound behind her like a witch shaking a fistful of bones before delivering a curse. Slowly, Amelia looked over her shoulder back toward the meadow. On the other side, something waited beyond the edge of the patch of moonlit ground. 4 narrow eyes that blazed as red as a monster moon watched from the shadows beneath the trees. Whatever skull housed those eyes remained just beyond her vision, camouflaged by the night. The rattling noise came again, accompanied by a low growl. Amelia swallowed, her throat suddenly dry. Heart slamming against her chest, she slowly reached for her lantern, fingers brushing across the symbol engraved into the metal. Just touching it helped calm her nerves. The small lantern had been a wedding gift from a friend she hadn't seen in years. It had saved her life on many occasions. But if she lit it now, she'd have to fight not only what was right in front of her, but also everything between her and home. Amelia was no stranger to not knowing exactly what she was facing. Knowledge was rare, and a good tutor even rarer. Over the past 8 months, she'd encountered nearly a dozen creatures without the slightest idea what they were. Perhaps one day soon a Nighthunter would wander into Nistleton and teach her of their trade. Until such a day came, however, Amelia would follow her practiced method. With cautious, deliberate movements, she retreated back the way she'd come, all while keeping her gaze on the ground directly in front of the glowing embers of the moonspawn's eyes. In the safety of the walls of Nistleton, she could research beasts that matched the description of this one in the library, or by asking the older rangers. Only when she knew what she was up against would she return to slay it. Even without a Nighthunter's training, she could still prepare herself. She couldn't afford to die carelessly, not with her son waiting for her. The creature did not move as Amelia backed away. In every corner of Midora, moonspawn were known for their insatiable hunger. The fact that this creature wasn't already prowling toward her had Amelia's stomach tying itself into a painful knot. Once out of the meadow and back in the woods, Amelia quickly lost sight of the eyes. She turned, quickening her pace, though careful not to run in case it was still watching between the trees, excited for a chase. A flare of pain in her ankle brought Amelia tumbling to the ground. She cursed and kicked at the willow root that had tripped her with her uninjured foot. A glance over her shoulder revealed a pair of red eyes, closer this time. Close enough to hear the heavy breathing coming from the place where her vision ended, and darkness began. She rose and resumed her retreat with gritted teeth. Each step sent pain lancing through her ankle, but she refused to limp or lean too heavily on her spear, for fear of appearing weak. The eyes followed her, bobbing up and down as the body behind them effortlessly traversed the hazardous ground. Her ankle screamed with pain, but resting on the ground would leave her too exposed. She thought briefly about climbing a tree and waiting until morning, then dismissed the idea. That was just as dangerous an option if the moonspawn tailing her could climb. Much to her relief, when she looked back again, the eyes had fallen far behind. They still watched, but they were so small now she could only make them out because of their luminescence. Had it really lost interest in her? It was possible. Some moonspawn were no more than scavengers that waited for something else to slaughter prey for them before moving in for the scraps. If that were the case, she had less to worry about than she thought. Amelia looked back ahead and screamed. Another pair of eyes leered out of a berry bush, this time close enough to reach out and touch. She felt the hot damp of its breath against her skin and gagged as the smell of rot and bile washed over her. She threw herself back, nearly dropping her spear in the process. To her surprise, despite how close this moonspawn was, it made no move to attack. She flipped her gaze between the two sets of eyes. The one in front of her blocked her way back to town, and the one behind her kept her from going back to the open space of the meadow. Fine, she would make her stand at the river. The crossing log would provide a defensible position where she had the high ground and could see them coming. As quick as she could, Amelia limped toward the stream. The eyes followed. The moonspawn were making noise now where previously they had been completely silent. Claws clicked on the wood and stones, and the growls grew louder. Their heavy breathing on either side of her mingled with the clicking of their teeth. Whenever Amelia tried to change her route, the eyes cut in front of her and diverted her path, giving her an awful sense that she was being led somewhere. At last, Amelia stepped into the river. The chill of the water came as a shock, but a welcome one as it quickly soothed her twisted ankle into numbness. The moonspawn behind her howled. The first set of eyes that had been following her since the meadow paced up and down the bank while the other vanished only to reappear on the other side, effectively flanking her between them. Amelia splashed down the stream. It was decidedly difficult to keep quiet when being chased by two monsters down a river in the dark of night with a twisted ankle. The two sets of eyes continued to flank her, though their pace almost seemed leisurely, and they'd even began to fall behind. She was close to the crossing log, to safety. A fight seemed inevitable, and if she was going to fight, then she needed to be able to see properly. Amelia pressed her finger against the rune engraved into the base of the metal lantern and whispered the words of power that corresponded to the writing. Igivo Imola. Light bloomed out from the lantern, reflecting off the stream and driving back the shadows. Amelia's eyes stung, and she had to squint while they adjusted. She only caught a glimpse of her pursuers. Matted black fur covered heavy muscled bodies that stood on 6 legs. Light was a beacon, yes, but darkness was no longer a shroud she could rely on. The creatures vanished in an instant, retreating to the darkness that sheltered them from her sight. She was close to the crossing log, to safety. Their eyes reappeared soon after, just at the border of the lantern's halo. They snarled, and she could hear that rattling again, faster this time, like a woodpecker hammering into a tree. She swung the lantern wildly between them, forcing them back. The snarls grew more agitated as the light flung around, casting long shadows and revealing rows of white and yellow teeth before the moonspawn backed away. This wouldn't hold them off for long. Amelia tightened her sweating palm around her spear as it threatened to slip away from her shaky grip. If these creatures were intelligent enough to coordinate their movement to hurt her and flank her, then no doubt their attack would also come with such practiced, coordinated violence that she wouldn't stand a chance when they pounced. She watched for any hint of movement, any sign that the moonspawn were preparing to attack. The seconds passed into minutes, each spent in such a state of tension that all of Amelia's muscles were burning by the time she saw the crossing log. Tears sprang to her eyes, and she rushed forward as the shapes to her left and right closed in. She'd made it. The moonspawn on either side were too far away to get to her before she could scramble up the log. She was only a few steps away now. All she needed to do was build the momentum to jump off her good leg and clamber up to safety. Her steps slowed to a halt as a third set of red eyes appeared atop the log. Amelia swallowed hard as she realized the moonspawn flanking her had stayed back this long because she'd been going exactly where they wanted her to. They herded her here, to the point of illusory safety, where their third packmate was lying in wait. With a quivering hand, Amelia rose her light to see the creature proper. She had only a moment to see the hulking wolfish thing before it leapt forward, its jaw and throat splitting open all the way from maw to stomach, revealing the scores of teeth lining the insides of its esophagus. She raised her spear, but the shaft snapped beneath the weight of the creature, and then it was upon her. Its weight threw her onto her back with a crunch, and pinned her with paws as large as her head. Her lantern was torn from her grip by the impact, clattering into the stream where it was quickly doused. The throat closed around her like a hug from 100 knives. Teeth tore her flesh to ribbons in an instant. For a moment, she smelled the rotting stench of the thing's previous prey, and then only the scent of her own blood. Emilia grabbed for the knife at her belt, but just as she found the hilt, another throat closed around her arm, followed by a third around her thigh. Emilia thrashed and screamed down the throat of the moonspawn as it fed on her, but it only came out as a gurgle, not even louder than the stream that flowed around her as she died beneath the crossing log. So, was it worth a watch?
I don't... No. It was awful.
It always is. I never caught your name, Ranger.
Tarin, sir.
Well, Tarin, are you coming or not?
Coming where, exactly?
Normally, dire wolves are a minor threat when compared to other moonspawn, but once they acquire a taste for humans, they won't be afraid to come out during a cloudy day. If we leave them alone, any traders and travelers will suffer the same end Emilia did. We'll reach the forest before dark if you're ready to go now.
The captain won't be able to pay you. He wasn't even going to get a hunter to check Emilia's body until her husband threatened to throw him over the walls on the next monster moon. And even then, he only asked you because you were passing through.
I don't care about the money.
Is it true that hunters can defeat a whole pack of moonspawn by themselves?
This is true, though it does depend on what type of creature they are.
And hypothetically, if they were direwolves?
I see. When I was younger, I had the strength to defeat thrice the number I saw Emilia face on my own. I never did, though. Do you know why?
I couldn't say.
Because I, too, knew fear. I stand here today because I was taught the wisdom of caution. I was taught when to face my fear and when to obey my instincts. Emilia already understood that. She would have made a fine hunter. Seeing as there is a perfectly capable ranger right in front of me, it would be rather imprudent of me to go alone, wouldn't you say? We'd best get going if we want to make good time. What will it be? Think carefully, because I have a feeling your captain will be sending out more officers to appease the merchant lords now that the bravest among you is dead. And standing before you is your best bet to deal with those direwolves safely. I swear no harm will befall you if you stay by my side.
It might take some haggling, but I'm sure you could convince the captain to give us a unit by tomorrow.
The world breeds new monsters every night, Tarin. I may choose to stand idle, but the moonspawn will not. Hunger calls them to action just as they in turn beckon me into the wild. Either way, I'm going out there. I would prefer not to do so on my own. What is your answer?
Fine. I'm coming.
Good. Direwolves may be pack creatures, but they make for awful company.